Right. Good morning. This hearing will now come to order. Welcome to today's hearing entitled Setting New Courses for Polar Weather Satellites and Earth Observations. This is a familiar topic to this committee and subcommittee. Since 2003, there have been 7 hearings before the Science and Technology Committee or various subcommittees on the subject of the National Polar Orbiting Operational Environmental Satellite System. Mercifully, there is an acronym, INPOS. Established in 1994, the program was intended to design, develop, construct, and launch satellites into polar orbits so that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the Department of Defense, DoD, would continue to receive daily data necessary for civilian and military weather forecasting needs. In the 2003 hearing, the life cycle cost for INPOS in March 2003 budget was $6.1 billion, with the first of 6 satellites expected to be launched in 2009. In last year's hearing, the life cycle cost estimate had grown to at least $14.9 billion, was intended to purchase only 4 satellites, with a first INPOS satellite launch pushed back to 2014. INPOS has continued to suffer from major performance problems and schedule delays for the primary imaging instrument, and those spawned cost overruns. The program has undoubtedly been snake bit, but at least we thought we knew the snake that bit it. The real problem appeared to be that the program was crippled by a management structure that delayed decisions at critical moments. The Tri-Agency Management Board proved incapable of making decisions and taking action when most needed. Last year's witnesses testified before the subcommittee that program leadership had deteriorated to the point that only White House intervention would assure that there would ever be any INPOS satellite at all. At that hearing, we were told that one agency should be put in charge of managing the program, either DoD or NOAA. OSTP did take responsibility for intervening to rescue the drifting program, but instead of putting one of those 2 agencies in charge, OSTP adopted the Solomonic solution of cutting the program in 2. Satellites flying in orbits to collect early morning observations would be developed and launched by DoD with their newly christened Defense Weather Satellite System. NOAA would do the same thing with their renamed Joint Polar Satellite System to collect observations in the afternoon. NOAA would operate all the satellites while in orbit and would manage the common data to receive, store, and share the data. With this decision, OSTP has removed the block over which we have been stumbling in the last few years, the snake that appears to have bitten this program repeatedly, but that is not all that will be required to guarantee success. There was a reason for having a single program in the first place. And splitting the program in 2 may simply create 2 programs with the same old problems. There are plenty of reasons to keep attention fixed on these new programs. For example, even though we now have clarity about what agency is responsible for which mission, this clarity apparently comes at the cost of delay and confusion about which instruments will be flown on which satellite and when will the satellite launch. There's a contractor that still has continuing work for the old INPOS program and subcontractors with instruments in various states of development. What is to be the fate of those work efforts, and when will those decisions be made? Our other discussion today grows out of our experience with INPOS. Back in 2006, all of the climate sensors being prepared to fly on INPOS were removed. If we anticipate having to deal with climate change, or I'm sure Dr. Brown would say the possibility of climate change, for decades to come, how can we eliminate a means for knowing how well we're doing? It has been clear that this decision was ill thought through and would have to be reversed. Without those sensors or similar capabilities, our ability to strengthen our Earth observation networks as a whole will be compromised. We asked GAO to examine the current state of the strategy for gathering necessary climate data. GAO's answer is that we don't have one, at least not a comprehensive strategy. That is a subject that we hope the administration witnesses can discuss today. We have spent almost $6 billion already on the INPOS program, the original projected cost of the whole program. There is not a single completed satellite to show for that time and money. We do have, however, 2 signs that read, "Now under new management." I know it is the hope of everyone here that the new management for the now 2 agencies, 2 programs, will be the solution to what is ailed INPOS. I now recognize Dr. Brown from Georgia, the ranking member of the investigation of this subcommittee, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for your record, what I question is that human-induced global warming.
Okay.
So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome our witnesses here today at this important hearing, and thank you for your participation. This is the committee's first hearing on the Joint Polar Satellite System, but the 7th time we've looked in the previous program, the INPOS program, National Polar Orbiting Operational Environmental Satellite System. INPOS was originally planned to create synergies and cost savings by combining the Defense Meteorological Satellite Program within the Department of Defense and the Polar Orbiting Environmental Satellite System at NOAA. Instead, the program doubled in cost, shrunk from 6 to 4 satellites, degraded its sensor capabilities, and its schedule slipped 6 years. Now, 15 years later, we're back where we started. At last year's hearing, I asked the questions. How did we get here? And where do we go from here? My question today is, where are we going? The administration announced plans to restructure the program last winter, but as Mr. Power points out in his testimony, quote, because neither agency has finalized plans for its acquisition, the full impact of OSTP's decision on the expected cost, schedule, and capabilities is unknown, unquote. Until we receive this information, we can't fully review this new program. While it is understandable that it will take time to restructure, I hope the administration consults with Congress and with this committee in particular, given its history with the program. I look forward to working with the administration and with the chairman as we move forward. As I said at last year's hearing, every American is impacted by this program, whether they know it or not. It is our responsibility to ensure that the farmers, fishermen, warfighters, and everyday commuters continue to receive weather and climate information. But we must not forget to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money and root out waste, inefficiency, and duplication where we can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. I now ask unanimous consent with all additional opening statements submitted by members be included in the record without objection, so ordered. It is now my pleasure to introduce our witnesses. Dr. Sherry Abbott is the Associate Director of the Energy and Environment Division in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Ms. Abbott directed the task force established by Dr. John Holdren, Director of OSTP, to evaluate changes in the management of the INPOS program. Ms. Mary Glacken is the Deputy Director, Undersecretary for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Ms. Glacken supervises NOAA's transition to the follow-on Joint Polar Satellite System and the expanded cooperation with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration to develop afternoon orbit satellite coverage. Mr. Christopher Scalisi, is the Associate Administrator for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. NASA will resume its traditional role of supporting NOAA in developing the JPSS weather satellites, and Mr. Scalisi will testify today about the changes that will be needed to bring NASA into the program. Mr. Gil Klinger is the Director of the Space and Intelligence Office, providing oversight for all Department of Defense space and intelligence programs within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. Mr. Klinger is currently elaborating what changes, if any, DoD plans to make for polar weather satellite coverage in the wake of the decision to transfer responsibility for acquiring morning orbit satellites to DoD. And then finally, Mr. David Pawner is the Director of Information Technology Management System Issues at the Government Accountability Office, GAO. Mr. Pawner has directed GAO's team monitoring of the INPOS program for this committee. since 2001. GAO's report last year and Mr. Pollner's testimony at the subcommittee's previous hearing was central to the convening of the administration's task force, and he has 2 reports to share with our subcommittee today. As our witnesses should know, you will have each have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. Your written testimony will be included in the record for the hearing. When you have all completed your spoken testimony, we will begin with questions, and each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel. It is the practice of the subcommittee because we are an investigations and oversight subcommittee, to receive our testimony under oath. Do any of you have any objection to taking an oath? The record should reflect that all the witnesses said that they had no objection to taking an oath. You also have the right to be represented by counsel. Do any of you have counsel here? The record should reflect that all of the witnesses indicated that they did not have counsel here. Please now stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? Okay. The record should reflect that all of the witnesses took the oath. I should say, for purposes of understanding the flow, there is a likelihood that we will be called for votes at an awkward time, probably in the middle of the opening statements, but we'll go as far as we can, and we will break and come back after our votes. So let us now begin with Ms. Abbott. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to appear today to discuss the decision to restructure the MPOSE program and the administration's efforts to improve capabilities for Earth observations. As you, Mr. Chairman, noted, the MPOSE program was created 16 years ago to combine civil and military operational weather satellite capabilities that would provide global weather coverage, storm tracking, and climate monitoring requirements. The tri-agency construct of the MPOSE program was intended to integrate the talent, technology, and resources of the agencies into a single converged operational system. DoD was responsible for major program acquisitions and contract administration, NOAA was responsible for satellite operations, and NASA was responsible for developing new technologies. In spite of this vision of coordination and efficiency, and in spite of multiple attempts to improve its execution, the program has consistently been behind schedule, over budget, and underperforming. At the request of Dr. Holdren, Assistant to the President for Science and Technology, I convened an Executive Office of the President task force on this matter starting in August 2009, with participation from the Office of Management and Budget and the National Security Council. Working closely with the 3 agencies, the task force performed a thorough analysis of the program, its content, cost projections, budgeting, acquisition issues, and related management options. The task force found that the major challenge of MPOSE was its structure, jointly funding and executing common ground on a single program with a single common platform and a uniform set of instruments. This is because the 3 agencies have different technical objectives, acquisition procedures, engineering and management philosophies, risk tolerance, and approaches to managing budget adjustments. These differences led to continued developmental challenges, escalating costs, and increasing risk. In consultation with the agencies, the EOP leadership decided to disaggregate management of the satellite programs by proceeding with separately managed acquisitions. The key elements of the restructured program will retain the observational requirements of the MPOSE program. However, NOAA and DoD will be responsible for meeting these requirements through their assigned orbits. NOAA, with NASA acting as the acquisition agent, will be responsible for the afternoon orbit. DoD will be responsible for the early morning orbit. The European Organization for Exploitation of Meteorological Satellites will continue to provide observations in the mid-morning orbit. The agencies will continue to partner in those areas that have been successful in the past, such as a shared ground system. The NOAA portion of the restructured program is called the Joint Polar Satellite System. The DoD portion will be called the Defense Weather Satellite System. This structure is codified in the sector guidelines in the National Space Policy released yesterday. The program restructure accomplishes the following goals. First, it reduces the risk of schedule slips and cost increases by clarifying acquisition authorities. Second, it allows each agency to manage its program within its own agency culture and environment. Third, it provides clear accountability, responsibility, and authority for each orbit. Fourth, it allows for greater government control over the development process. Fifth, it retains strategic coordination across the civil and defense programs. And sixth, it aligns with proven acquisition centers. I want to be clear. We're not canceling the program, but merely restructuring the procurements to put the program on a pathway to success, taking maximum advantage of government expertise. We'll be using all of the taxpayer-funded investments for the future satellite programs. The decision is supported by the long history of reviews called for by the Congress and the agencies, as well as independent reviews of the program. Plans for continuity of a number of Earth observations from space have been tied to NPOS at one point or another in the program's history. With the NPOS decision behind us, the administration is focusing on the broader issue of the development of a comprehensive strategy for Earth observations. We're working internationally through the Group of Earth Observations toward the development of an integrated Earth observing system with leadership from the U.S., provided by the agencies through the U.S. Group on Earth Observations. In addition, the substantial increases in funding as part of the President's proposed FY11 budget for NASA's Earth Sciences program will be used to address the pressing issues related to the nation's climate research and monitoring capabilities and climate data continuity. And the administration will be drawing on the analysis of the U.S. GEO as a first but very significant step in the development of a comprehensive strategy for Earth observations. In conclusion, OSTP will continue to play an important role in coordinating interagency satellite observation policy, successfully restructuring the NPOS program and ensuring continuity of weather and climate data has been a high priority for the administration's leadership team. We will continue to meet regularly with NOAA, NASA, and DoD to ensure a smooth transition of the program to meet the nation's need for weather forecasting, storm tracking, and climate monitoring. I look forward to working with the committee as we move the NPOS program on a pathway to success and as we move forward with a broader national strategy for Earth observations. I'll be pleased to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Ms. Glacken for 5 minutes.
Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, and distinguished members and committee of the members and staff of the committee, I too appreciate the opportunity to testify in front of you today. I've been working closely with Secretary Locke and Undersecretary Lubchenco to ensure the continuity of the critical weather and satellite data that this nation needs. As has been highlighted here by the opening statements, it was imperative that a decision be made to address the acquisition challenges facing the NPOS program. NOAA's follow-on program to NPOS, the Joint Polar Satellite System, or JPSS, will address our requirements to provide global environmental data and support our mission. Since the administration's decision to restructure the program, NOAA has taken several steps to ensure that there's uninterrupted, reliable weather and climate data. We have established a transition team, including members from the Department of Commerce, NOAA, and NASA, with participation of the Department of Defense. We've made significant progress moving forward, including defining the organizational structure and beginning the process of locating and staffing the JPSS office. NOAA and NASA are assuring that we have high-performing teams working on the program, and in particular leveraging and the placement of the civil workforce that we have at the Integrated Program Office today. Concurrent with these activities, we've also moved forward to ensure that the NPOS requirements for the afternoon orbit are appropriately translated into program-level requirements for JPSS. The Integrated Program Office oversight has been reassigned to the Air Force Space and Missile Systems Center. We have a NOAA senior engineer with significant experience that's been assigned to work with this center for close coordination. The IPO has issued guidance outlining priorities for work stoppage and, in particular, ensuring that we maintain the NPOS preparatory project NPP cost and schedule as a top priority. Due to delays in the NPOS program, it's been necessary to repurpose the NPP satellite from a research mission to an operational satellite. All the instruments have been delivered for integration onto the NPP satellite, and NOAA is supporting NASA's efforts for launch of this satellite. The JPS afternoon orbit will maintain observations that were planned for NPOS in the afternoon orbit. We anticipate that NASA will assume management control of these sensor acquisitions in early fiscal year 2011. NOAA will continue the development and fielding of the ground system network that was to support NPOS and its users. The President's budget provides adequate resources to support NOAA's efforts for completing the development of the ground system, which will be used by both DoD and NOAA for both the morning and afternoon orbits. As I've mentioned, continuity of data is a top priority and the basis for all of our considerations. After careful analysis of technical costs, schedule, and programmatic risks, with input and advice from NASA, NOAA has decided to procure a clone of the NPP spacecraft bus to support the JPSS-1 launch readiness date of 2014. We believe an NPP clone will carry the same suite of instruments and collect the same data as NPP, provides a proven solution for placing these sensors in orbit. This will allow us to meet our launch readiness date in 2014 and minimize the potential of an observation gap. We're still working with NASA and DoD regarding the spacecraft decisions for the second spacecraft that will support a 2017 launch readiness date. During this transition phase, our ability to make final decisions are still coupled with the Department of Defense. Due to DoD's decision-making timeline on the spacecraft bus, a level of uncertainty still exists regarding the resolution of the Northrop contract. Until the contract is resolved, NOAA will continue to be exposed to additional procurement schedule and cost risk. I would like to briefly address the two GAO reports that are subject to this hearing. NOAA agrees with the recommendations in both reports, and I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the tremendous effort of OSTP has undertaken over the years to address the importance of continuing critical space-based climate observations. With respect to the GAO report released at this hearing addressing risks that jeopardize continuity of weather and climate data, we appreciate the perspectives of the GAO professionals in their regular reviews of the NPOS program. The report provides recommendations to both the Secretaries of Defense and Commerce, and NOAA agrees with all recommendations in this report. In conclusion, NOAA appreciates the committee's continued interest in the success of the agency's satellite programs. It's widely acknowledged that satellites are very complicated and difficult systems to design, build, and operate. However, NOAA is acting quickly to support the February 1st, 2010 decision to restructure this program. And I too would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Glack, and Mr. Scalise for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss NASA's role in and commitment to the JPSS program. This program is crucial to the nation's ability to make important weather and climate measurements. NASA's role will be to manage the acquisition and integration of the JPSS program elements on behalf of NOAA. As the nation's civil space agency, NASA is fully prepared to support JPSS. NASA, and more specifically, NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, has over 40 years of experience developing large-scale operational space systems for NOAA. NASA Goddard developed the first operational weather satellite, TIROS-1, launched in 1961, and has continued to support NOAA through development and deployment of the geostationary operational environmental satellites and the polar orbiting environmental satellites. Further, NASA has decades of experience developing and supporting Earth observation system research satellites. Many of these capabilities serve as prototypes for operational missions, such as the Aqua satellite, launched in 2002, that demonstrated the capabilities intended for JPSS. At present, NASA is developing the NPOS Preparatory Project, NPP, to serve as a gap filler for the afternoon orbiting weather satellites. I must emphasize that NPP was originally intended to be a risk reduction mission for the NPOS provided instruments, so the lifetime and data delivery requirements are not the same as for JPSS. However, the experience that NASA and Goddard have obtained working with the NPOS program and its contractors on NPP have provided considerable knowledge of the critical systems required for JPSS. Therefore, the acquisition of JPSS, while a large task, is extremely well aligned with the existing capabilities and experience of Goddard. The JPSS program at Goddard will lead integration across all of the elements of JPSS to ensure delivery of the required data products for weather and climate. This activity includes spacecraft, ground systems, and instruments, including the critical visible infrared imaging radiometer, cross-track infrared sounder, advanced technology microwave sounder, and ozone mapping and profiling suite of instruments. All three agencies remain committed to a partnership that preserves and enhances the nation's weather and climate measurement capabilities. The three agencies have established a joint team to transition the NPO's contracts and activities to the responsible agencies with as little disruption as possible. And we expect to have contracts or contract modifications in place by early fiscal year 2011. NASA is working with NOAA to establish a high-caliber team of experienced personnel to implement JPSS. The team will be a combination of NASA and NOAA employees with significant experience in acquisition, spaceflight development, and Earth remote sensing. For NASA in particular, the JPSS program team will be composed of personnel from NPP, as well as members from the successful Hubble Space Telescope Servicing Mission 4, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the Solar Dynamics Orbiter, and the recently launched GOES-N series of geostationary satellites and missions. Last, I would like to report that all of the instruments for NPP have been delivered for integration with the spacecraft, including the NPO's provided VIIRS and CRIS instruments. With now a full complement of instruments, we are beginning testing with the ground system and anticipate a launch date of late 2011. In summary, NASA is committed to a successful JPSS program. NASA will build on its long relationship supporting NOAA and our experience with operational and research Earth observation satellites to minimize data gaps and provide the nation with the critical operational observation capability it needs. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I appreciate the support of Congress and this committee and would be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. I believe we can get the opening testimony in. We'll be called to vote during it, but we have 15 minutes, which really turns out to be 25 minutes, so at least. So we can complete the testimony, then I suspect we'll break. You will be at ease, and we'll return and ask for our questions. Mr. Klinger for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Brown, members of the subcommittee, I'm honored to appear before you today to discuss the Department of Defense's role in assuring continuity of the nation's environmental monitoring mission in light of the restructuring of the National Polar Orbiting Operational Environmental Satellite System program. As the Director of the Space and Intelligence Office for the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, I'm pleased to join my colleagues here at the table today. I think our presence here today reflects our collective commitment to continue to work together to meet our nation's weather needs, and that's certainly the Defense Department's position. The Environmental Monitoring Mission serves a critical role in day-to-day weather forecasting and provides critical support for nearly all defense and national security users. So I share your concerns about preserving continuity of environmental data for all users. In this regard, I'm pleased to report that the Department of Defense, in close coordination with our interagency partners, has made considerable progress in executing the administration's direction to restructure NPOS and to continue to pursue capabilities needed to meet the nation's environmental monitoring needs. Since receiving the EOP direction, the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics has chaired 3 Defense Acquisition Board reviews to assess follow-on options and acquisition approaches to address DoD responsibilities under the restructure and ensure transition of former NPOS elements to the appropriate acquisition agencies. At a minimum, the DoD program, designated the Defense Weather Satellite System, or DWSS, will be available for launch in 2018 and will meet or exceed Defense Meteorological Satellite Program, or DMSP, legacy performance while ensuring mission continuity in the early morning orbit. The DoD is deliberately studying available options to ensure that we strike the right balance of cost, performance, and technical risk while staying within current budgetary constraints. To meet the on-orbit timeline required, the DoD will leverage technology and previous investments in the NPOS program. The DWSS and JPSS programs will share a common ground system based on that designed for NPOS. Under the restructure, ground system development is a NOAA-NASA responsibility. NOAA will operate DoD satellites on a reimbursable basis as it does today for the Defense Department with respect to DMSP. Additionally, the Visible Infrared Imager Radiometer Suite, or VIIRS, and Space Environmental Monitor, NPOS, SEM-N, are prominent in our plans for use on the DWSS program. The Air Force is also developing an implementation plan addressing the most appropriate microwave sensor and satellite bus to meet DoD requirements and the attendant procurement strategy. Further, the procurement strategy will seek to maximize the government's investment in NPOs. It will focus on the best mix of cost, technical risk, and capability, and where applicable, support NOAA's JPSS program. We plan to finalize our procurement strategy not later than August 10th of this year. Weather observation and forecasting has greatly improved over the last 4 decades, due in large part to space-based environmental sensing. Global, high-resolution measurements of atmospheric temperature, density, and humidity populate mathematical models for weather prediction. Our warfighters need accurate, time-sensitive weather data as a key enabler for maneuver planning, weapons employment, and intelligence collection. DWSS will continue to provide critical global environmental information to effectively employ military capabilities and aid in the protection of national resources. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Mr. Klinger did not use all of his time. Outstanding. Mr. Powner for 5 minutes.
Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the subcommittee, we appreciate the opportunity to testify on the disbanding of the NPOS program and our broader report on the need for a long-term strategy for climate and space weather observations. First, NPOS. When the task force led by the White House's Office of Science and Technology Policy decided in February of this year to disband the NPOS program and go back to separate satellite acquisitions for NOAA and DoD, many viewed this as fixing the problem. As our report being released today points out, we are far from fixing the problem. First, both NOAA and DoD's programs are not completely defined, nor are the detailed costs and launch schedules. Although to their credit, last week both NOAA and DoD announced the key sensors they plan to pursue in their separate acquisitions. Transition risks are significant. These include loss of key staff, supporting the other agencies' requirements, and litigation costs. Near-term budgetary challenges are also a major issue as the agencies are continuing work on NPOS while starting their new programs. In addition, they're slowing work because contractor termination liability payments and other litigation costs are still unknown. Because of this, we are recommending that NOAA and DoD expedite decisions on the capabilities of the separate satellite acquisitions and the associated costs and launch schedules, and to effectively manage the transition risks. In addition, the major issues that led to NPOS's failures are still relevant to the new programs, and neither NOAA, NASA, or DoD should lose sight of these. These include technical complexity. Specifically, the VIIRS instrument plan for the first JPSS satellite is high risk. Contractor and subcontractor oversight and performance should be a major focus area, as should rigorous program management. In addition, an executive-level oversight structure still needs to be defined for the new programs. Finally, the agencies can't repeat the past poor interagency coordination that plagued NPOS. NOAA and NASA will need to work together effectively on the new civilian satellite acquisition. Failing to effectively manage these transition risks and the separate satellite acquisitions could result in the combined programs costing more than NPOS. In addition, further launch delays are likely to jeopardize the continuity of weather and climate data. Of particular concern is keeping the demonstration satellite known as NPP on schedule, as it is to replace the final operational POS that is expected to reach the end of its lifespan at the end of 2012. All indications are that NPP will slip further than the 9 months indicated in our report. Turning to the larger data continuity issue, in 2006, when the NPOS program was restructured, several climate and space weather instruments were removed to save costs, knowing that these could be addressed later or on other satellites. This complicated an already chaotic approach to our nation's long-term environmental satellite observations. There is no overall strategy to ensure continuity of climate and space weather observations, despite the fact that for over a decade, federal agencies and the climate community at large have clamored for one. Interestingly, a White House-sponsored interagency working group has worked on a short-term strategy and has even drafted a report that identifies and prioritizes these climate observations. This could form the basis for a long-term strategy that ensures our nation adequately monitors the Earth's atmosphere, oceans, land, and space environments. As we heard this morning from Ms. Abbott, OSTP plans to work on this strategy. In summary, Mr. Chairman, NOAA and DoD need to define and effectively manage their separate satellite acquisitions, now that NPOS has been disbanded. But in the near term, the transition risks need to be effectively managed. Once the scope of the respected programs are agreed to, any additional gaps in environmental observations will need to be addressed in the strategic planning efforts currently being led by OSTP. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Powner. Mr. Brown is recognized for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you, Chairman. I ask unanimous consent that Mr. Rohrbacher, who's a member of the full committee but not the subcommittee, be allowed to participate as if he's a member.
I'll wait longer than I usually would for an objection to that. All right, without objection, that's so granted. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I could yield
yes.
for 30 seconds, I'd like to thank Mr. Powner for y'all's hard work, and I particularly want to thank you for your yearly reports and all that you have done for this committee. Without your hard work and participation, it'd be very difficult for us to do our job. So thank you very much. Are you back, Mr. Chairman?
All right, we now need to go vote. You all are at ease. We will be back.